Until Dawn, from 2025, directed by David F. Sandberg. Full spoiler warning in effect. I have a very deep and abiding love of the original Until Dawn video game. I'm not merely because Larry Fessenden, one of my favorite directors, had a hand in writing the story for the game and the lore of the game and actually appears in the game, mocapped as himself, and not only because it concerns Wendigos, which is one of my favorite mythological animals, as well as, quite frankly, one of the most terrifying creatures I could possibly imagine. The 2015 video game was developed by Supermassive Games and came out after a long period of time gestating with them on various platforms before coming out exclusively for the PlayStation 4. It is very much a walking simulator type of experience. You walk around various locations, you discover collectibles. In this case, in the game's case, they are totems that show you a brief sequence of something that may or may not happen in the future, depending on how you play the game. And then there are quick time events and cutscenes. It's very much an interactive movie experience. I thought that they did some very genre-savvy things with that story in terms of creating the red herring of the psycho killer before revealing the actual cause of the supernatural infestation. Going into the movie, I had seen the trailers for the movie and I saw a Wendigo in the movie. And you also, I believe, see a very short glimpse of Peter Stormare as the convenience store clerk, or the gas station clerk. But the mechanism of the movie was something entirely alien to the game, which was the recurring Groundhog Day, Happy Death Day kind of time loop, with various things occurring differently every single time. I was intrigued, but I had also been burned by Sony Pictures and Screen Gems before with their handling of the Slender Man movie, which I believe was one of the most titanic mistakes I've ever seen. Mainly because the trailer made it seem as though it was going to be an experience very much in keeping with the Slender Man mythos created by the original creepypasta story and something weird, not something weird. Anyway, the original web presence of the character. Completely separate from how it's treated in ARG and later fictitious renditions of the characters such as Marble Hornets or The Rake. I approached this film with cautious optimism, because if it was like Happy Death Day, and I really do love the two Happy Death Day movies, I was going to enjoy it, but I felt like it would forever have a demerit simply because it's taking the name from a video game and it has nothing to do with it. Clover, Ella Rubin, a 20-something searching for her missing sister Melanie, Maya Mitchell, has taken her friends on a whirlwind road trip retracing Melanie's path. Her friends are skeptical of actually finding anything, but feel that Clover needs the closure, so they take the drive. Her friends are Nina, Odessa Azion, and her boyfriend Abe, Belmont Camelli, Cloud Cuckoo Lander Megan, Ji Young Yu, and Clover's childhood friend and ex, Max, Michael Cimino. As they reach the last definable landmark from Melanie's messages, a rundown gas station, they are given a crucial clue that people are always going missing in nearby Glore Valley. With a new destination in mind, Clover is convinced that Melanie is somewhere in Glore Valley, and the group speeds off. Unfortunately, they drive directly into a torrential storm, and wind up at a dilapidated visitor center inexplicably untouched by the weather. Seemingly out of options, they hole up in the building, noticing but unfortunately ignoring a suspiciously ornate skull-decorated hourglass clock, and are quickly dispatched by a psycho killer, only to rewind back to the beginning of the night with their memories intact. Oh, and their bodies have physical reminders of their deaths. Can the group discover the purpose behind the time loop and survive until dawn? Sony and Screen Gems have a spotty record regarding adaptations, from the Category 5 Hurricane of Dreck that became Slender Man, To the middling Resident Evil film series, to the uninspired cinematic equivalent of cardboard that are Uncharted and Monster Hunter. Let me assuage all fears right up front. Until Dawn is an excellent horror movie with a very fun plot, engaging performances, and more than a passing relation to the original game. Lore fans, or those of us who overanalyze everything, will find a lot to discuss and ponder, but it's probably best to treat this less as a true part of the Until Dawn game timeline and more like a glorified Easter egg. This film has an admirable commitment to practical effects, some inspired monster designs, and isn't afraid to embrace some of the inherent absurdity of its plot. The cast all put in great performances, from Yu's quirky but understated spiritualist, to Azion's world-weary pessimist, Samino's nerdy naivete, and Carmelli's off-putting standoffishness. But the real standouts are Ruben's Clover and Peter Stormare's Dr. Hill. Clover is clearly coded to be the final girl, but quickly gets invalidated as each member of the group eventually gets a turn as the final survivor, prior to being brutally dispatched before the loop restarts. There's some very nice mirroring of theme and dialogue between Clover and Melanie throughout the film, and a serious case of doe eyes during all of her death scenes. All in all, she comes across very well as a capable heroine and worthy analog to Hayden Panettiere's Sam from the original game. Dr. Hill's return as the primary antagonist of the film affords Stormare the unique opportunity to not only revisit the character, but chew as much scenery as his great big bushy beard can handle.
A great big bushy beard!
Stormare practically swallows every scene he's in, adding his particular brand of physical and verbal tics, and immediately commands attention in much the same way his minute role in Francis Lawrence's Constantine as Lucifer became such a standout performance. Granted, his appearance here, and some details at the end, make massaging the film into the game's universe a dicey prospect, but it was nice to see the man enjoying himself. In all, there are some serious highlights to this adaptation, from the monster designs to the gradual addition of parts of the town in each loop, although some of those might just be the world gradually acclimatizing to Clover's mind. The Glore Witch is an inspired design, and felt like it stepped right out of Supermassive's other series, the Dark Pictures Anthology, specifically the Ghost Nurse in Man of Medan. There are some curious missteps, though, as we have hints of a werewolf creature that remains unseen, and the lamprey leech that infects Clover from the trailer goes entirely unexplained. There's more than a little cabin in the woods in this film, but not enough that feels grating or uninspired. Choosing to remain focused on the Wendigo and Psycho Killer truly was for the best, in my opinion. This is not giving short shrift to the rest of the cast. Zion's Nina is totally in line with her recent appearance as the main character in Hulu's Hellraiser reboot, and brings the same guarded standoffishness brittleness here, as the escalating situation forces her to extreme measures against her boyfriend's casual dismissal of Clover and company. Carmelli's Abe starts out as a callous third wheel who seemingly exists only to act as a self-serving thorn in the group dynamic, but his transformation into a genuine member of the group is thoroughly satisfying. Unfortunately, Yu's Megan is given the shortest end of the stick characterization-wise, with very little to do except become a victim loop after loop. Her character can best be summed up as Asian waif with psychic powers. Samino's Max is the only character given roughly equal screen time as Ruben's Clover. He's essentially the nerd of the group, but that role is consistently being undercut by his surprising bravery, ingenuity, and backstory. The brains of the group, he's the first to put together anything remotely resembling a defense, and discovers crucial clues to the loops. He also, at Clover's behest, euthanizes her after an attack by Megan to restart the loop, making him one of the most selfless characters in the film. What we're left with at the end is an admirable adaptation that, while not exactly scary, is wildly entertaining. Currently available video on demand, will be available on physical media on July 8th, 2025. Until Dawn is an excellent example of an adaptation that takes liberties with the source material and succeeds. Moreover, it takes some elements from the source material and explains them in a way that serves both source and adaptation. The skull hourglass, the characters seeing video of loop events they don't remember, while also creating its own distinct voice. If you're a diehard fan of the game, give the movie a try. If you're an Until Dawn noob, just sit back and enjoy the wild ride. No matter which you are, there are some incredible deaths and fantastic physical effects that really make it feel wild and freewheeling with tons of humor. I give Until Dawn an 8 out of 10. So this section may just be as long as the rest of the review in toto. So how does this film tie into the world of the game? Maddeningly, to be brutally honest. The game makes a point that Blackwood Mountain has always been cursed with the spirit of the Wendigo, and anyone who consumes human flesh on the mountain becomes possessed by the spirit of Makapitu. Obviously, this doesn't mesh with the film's origin of the Wendigo as a person who is trapped in the time loop until the lack of food and water causes them to mutate into Wendigo. There's some narration by Hill hand-waving the transformation by explaining that the Wendigo is a manifestation of extreme hunger and extreme need, but it does little to explain any connection between the creatures of the film and the creatures of the game. For the sake of argument, let's just assume that the Wendigos of the film are just an oblique reference to the game, and move on, shall we? It's not like it's the only one, since the appearance of the psycho killer is the same as Josh's serial killer ruse from the game. The fact that the sanitarium in the film shares the same name as the sanitarium from the game also complicates things. Hill mentions that traumatic events create metaphysical wounds that, combined with traumatized individuals, opens the door via the death clock into a thoroughly subjective realm, where the guiding person's mind shapes the world around them. My first inclination was to assume that the Glore mining accident was the same as the cave-in mentioned in the game, but the game clearly identifies it as the Northwest Mine accident and the Blackwood Pines Sanitarium. I was thinking that perhaps the Glore Valley was situated at Blackwood Mountain, and the supernatural area included the mountain, perhaps feeding into the Wendigo mythology. Alas, such cut-and-dried answers weren't forthcoming. Essentially, we're told that Glore Valley is entirely separate from Blackwood Mountain, although they could still be in the same general area. More on that in a minute. And the Glore mine accident swallowed the entire town, leaving only the visitors center above ground. So much for that theory. So on to the next! My next idea was that Hill acquired the skull clock at some point prior to the disaster and didn't understand how to activate it until the mine collapsed. We see a whole stack of Hill's ID cards in the basement from diverse times and diverse hospitals, and while they could just be relics of past loops, I'd like to believe that Hill is somehow functionally immortal due to his relationship with the clock. He seemingly fears none of the creatures when he appears, has intimate knowledge of how the loops work, and in the end, despite exploding, is seemingly alive and well at the end for the next experiment. I believe that he's trapped in the area when the clock is active, but when it isn't, he's free to leave, which would explain how he's the clerk at the gas station and seemingly had numerous appointments with Joshua Washington, if the game lore is correct. Also, if he doesn't leave, how does he have detailed psych records for his subjects? If we go with that theory, and his immortality is also seemingly confirmed in the deleted alternate ending of the film, then his relationship with the clock provides some justification for the surveillance cameras in his office. Perhaps the clock understands his intentions and gives him the means to observe the experiment, provided he feeds it souls? That last part might be a stretch, but consider this. Hill clearly states that someone needs to die to free the rest of the group, whether that's a sacrifice on the final day or what. And when Megan channels the missing people on night 2, there are a lot of individuals. If a single person enters the loop, there's only one way the loop ends, with that person becoming part of the night. Consider the child victim. We can safely assume that he didn't enter the valley by himself, as the picture doesn't look like a runaway, so where's his caretaker? Answer? The caretaker either allowed him to die to break free, or failed to save him and was rejected from the loop. If Hill brings single people into the ritual, There's no escape, and they eventually become Wendigos, thereby ending the spell. See, he's feeding patience to the ritual. Given what we see, it would make sense that he needs to power the ritual. It would also make sense that most of his patients were solitary, given their traumatic histories. Ignoring the fact that Wendigos are always present, does that mean that every danger in the film is merely a physical manifestation of Clover's mental state? As crazy psychiatrists go, Hill may be onto something, because what better way to see a patient's mental state than to examine/analyze a physical embodiment? His breakdown of the manifestations at the end seems to support this, but we're simply not given enough information. I mean, at what point are the Wendigos released into the scenario? We see the Psycho on night 1, and the Witch on night 2, then the exploding water on night 3, and Wendigos entering the mix thereafter. Perhaps the ritual keeps the Wendigos at bay for a certain amount of nights, dependent on how the subject reacts? I can't imagine Hill would get good data from just Wendigo attacks. Maybe, like in the game, the Wendigos are stored in the sanitarium and only released on later nights? Amusing side note. On night 2, when Nina and Abe try to drive off, they stop when they spot an enormous kaiju-sized shadow monster wandering the woods outside the visitor center. Some of the earliest myths of the Wendigo express the belief that the creature's rapacious appetite never ends, and that it will continue to grow larger the more meat it consumes. Maybe the kaiju is a reference to that. Anyway, the big elephant in the room is how, exactly, the Glore Valley location is connected to Blackwood. At no point in time are we given any idea where Glore Valley is located, only that it is in a remote area. It is possible that Melanie traveled from New York all the way west across country, then north to Alberta. It does seem like the group has been traveling for a while, but at no point do we get anything related to location, either at the gas station or in the visitor center. It's also possible that all of them are Canadian to begin with and just went west. So it's possible that the Glore Valley may be connected to Blackwood Pines and the magic of the skull clock envelops the whole area. However, at the very end of the film, we see the surveillance cameras in Hill's office switch from the Glore Valley Visitor Center to the Washington Lodge. Now, I thought that the change was just Hill switching to another one of his experiments, Joshua Washington. But some other people on TV Tropes and Reddit opined that the change was due to the ritual location changing, meaning that Hill changed Glore Valley to Mount Washington. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that this is the case, considering the fact it's heavily implied that Glore Valley is a known hotspot for disappearances, although that could also be Hill baiting the trap for Clover and the gang. Let's just say that Hill did change the location. Does that mean that the victims are trapped within the clock dimension? That the clock, and by extension Hill, exist in a pocket dimension filled/fueled by the souls of the lost? Another wrinkle is that we never see the skull clock in the game until dawn, nor does anyone ever write their name in a guest log or analogous item, both of which are key to the dimensional manifestations. The clock turns over to indicate the start of the loop. Nina/the victims restart writing their names in the guest book. So maybe the lodge is just a passing Easter egg, since the mechanics don't exactly match up? I suppose it isn't hard to think that the skull clock exists somewhere in the Washington Lodge, and that the car pulling up to it at the end is just Josh arriving to set up his cruel game. One final thought. The loop may help explain the totems from the game. In the game, the player picks up totems that show a brief glimpse of some future event, giving some measure of foreshadowing, however vague, of a crucial decision. Given that we, as the player, could end up making bad decisions that result in some characters' deaths and restart the experience, isn't that really just like the film's time loop? Perhaps the characters see mistakes made in other loops when they touch the totems, but we, as the player, only experience the single uninterrupted story? It's a very meta touch, but a welcome one. None of this takes away from enjoying the film. Personally, I found myself discussing the mechanics with Chrissy for over an hour after we finished watching the film, as we're both huge fans of the game. So, discuss! What's your interpretation? If you saw the film, did you enjoy it? You let me know in the comments. I've been Phantom, and this has been Horror Haunts. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good night, y'all.